Right? So who gets to decide all of this? Who gets to decide? Another question we could ask ourselves, who decides that something is permissible or impermissible? Right? Your mother or your father? Most of the time, right? Most of the time it's our parents who say you can't do this and you can't do that. But we want to take this authority or this appeal to authority even higher in our discussion today. Okay? We're going to ask questions like, what are the differences that we should be using? And that's the first point that I want to really delve into. What's the point of reference that we should be using when we are discussing important things in our lives? As Muslims, when I was growing up in Cape Town, my parents gave me so much freedom, subhanAllah. If I think about it now, I'm amazed at how much freedom I got as a Muslim boy. So much freedom. And then only when I reached the age of about 18, I realized that freedom has been more detrimental to me than helpful. Has been more detrimental than it has been beneficial. So, because when we grow up, we just get told things like, don't do that. The neighbors, what will the neighbors say? Right? Or don't do that, your grandmother, she won't like it. Or don't do that because, X, Y, and Z person is not going to approve. We don't grow up telling our children, don't do that. It's not pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't grow up getting told that if you want to go to Jannah, then do this because Allah loves this. And don't do that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't love that. Right? And why should you do that? Why should you? And if you talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you talk about His names and His attributes, imagine for a moment that we grew up like that. You know the hadith? If you know the hadith, then put up your hand, about the 7 people under the shade of Allah. Do you know that hadith? Who knows that hadith? Okay? But let me give you the hadith, and for those of you that don't know. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that there will be 7 people. Did I say 7? You just imagine there were 2 extra fingers there. Right? 7 people that will be under the shade of Allah on a day in which there will be no shade. Absolutely no shade. And why is this important, you might ask? Why is that important? Why is shade important on this day? Because the Prophet says in another hadith that on that day the sun will be closer than a mile. A mile now. In Arabic, we could interpret this in 2 ways. One will be an actual mile, 1.6 kilometers, or it could be that which is used to apply kuhl to the eyes. How big is that? It's about this big, right? That little instrument that people use to place, what do they call it in English? Kuhl. Anyone? Not mascara. Eyeliner. There's a nice word in India. Yes, right? But I can't think of an English word now. But you know what I mean. So it's about this big, so the sun will be that close and people will be drowning in this sweat. Right? Some people will have their sweat until their ankles, until their knees, but it will be extremely hot, heat that we couldn't imagine. So shade will be so beneficial on that day. And who are the 7 people that will be under that shade? Is the just imam, the leader, right? The just leader. The second person is the person I want to focus is شَاخٌ نَشَأَ فِي عِبَادَةِ اللَّهِ. Is that young person, not only has he worshipped Allah, but he has grown up in the worship of Allah. It's natural for him or her. They don't get told, wear your hijab, go to the masjid, why should I go? Because it's good for you, do it because I said so. That's how I grew up. I would watch my father, may Allah forgive him and me, but I would watch him, he would be watching the husband, and he would go to the masjid. He would say, no, do as I say, don't do as I do. Okay? And for us, those of you that are basically parents in the future, may Allah grant you all beautiful, handsome spouses, beautiful, healthy, pious children, inshallah. Say Ameen. Ameen. Right. So this is what we want, but we want our children to grow up in a manner that we perhaps did not grow up in. We want them to grow up in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it becomes who they are, not what they do because they are told to do it. Right? They love doing it. They are motivated to do it. Like one of my kids, his daughter, when she was 4 or 5 years old, she would wake up early. On this day, this is so amazing. She would come and wake up her parents going to bed and praying for salah. Right? That is how I want my children to be, and I would like your children to be like that as well. Right? That's what we want. That's the youth, that's the generation, and we have to, and how we want to mold that generation. How do we get there? If we start changing ourselves. If we become better. Right? Okay, let's move on, inshallah. You want me to complete the hadith before we move on? Yes, okay, so it's only fair. شاب نشأ في عبادة الله ورجل قلبه معلق بالمساجد. So the first person is the just imam, right? Who is that imam? The prime minister, the king, in our circumstances. But inshallah in the future it will be, one leader for the Muslims, the Khalifa, but a just imam nevertheless. Number two would be that young person who grew up in the worship of Allah. The third person is a rajul, the man whose heart is attached to the masjid. Right? His heart is attached to the masjid. Whenever he leaves the masjid, he cannot wait to return again. The fourth person is that person who meets another Muslim. They only meet for the sake of Allah because of their love that they have for each other for the sake of Allah. When they meet, when they get together, they come together because of their love for Allah. And when they leave each other, it's with the love of Allah as well. The fifth person is a man. Listen very carefully. This is very relevant to our topic. The first person is a man who is invited to illicit sexual intercourse, to zina, by a beautiful woman with status and stature. This hadith can also be flipped the other way around. A woman that is invited by a man who is very handsome and attractive and is also a man of stature. Okay? But what does this person say? This man and this woman, when they are invited to zina, they don't say, yes please. They say, Inni akhafullah. Indeed, I fear Allah. That even though every ounce of my body tells me that this is what I should do, and even though that I am hot-wired, that the way that Allah has created me is a person with desires, I will say no. Why? Because I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is why I say no. Not because I fear that someone will know, someone will find out, that someone will tell my wife or tell my mother or my father, or people will get to know that I've committed this sin. No. I say no because inni akhafullah. Let me ask you a question. It's a very interesting question, I think. A person is on his or her way to, this is a nice example, a casino, right? So, puts his wallet in his pocket and he's walking to the casino. He gets to the casino and the doors are closed. Is he sinful? So I'm walking to the casino, right? Why am I walking there? My intention is to do what? To gamble, right? So I get there and the casino's closed. Another scenario, I'm on my way to the bar, I'm walking towards the bar, and I get there, and I check my wallet, and I forgot it at home. Right? So now I can't drink. Am I sinful? Do you hear me? But if I had money in my pocket, would I have been drinking? Yes. If the casino was open, would I have been gambling? Yes. So how can I not be sinful? Why do you, okay, those of you that say no, someone articulate your reason. Who said no? I'm not sinful. There were a lot of people that said no, and now there are no hands. Right? Come on. Right? Who said no? If you said no, you articulate the reasoning. Why do you think I am not sinful? I had every intention to disobey Allah. So when I got there, the casino's closed. Am I sinful or not? If you say no, I'm not here to judge your answer. I want to know why you said so. That's more important to me. So tell me, someone, why do you think I am not sinful? Because I'm going to use this example later again. I'm interested in this girl, right? I'm interested in her. I find her very attractive, mashallah, very intelligent, sophisticated, and all those other 20 reasons. Now we tell ourselves, make this okay. So I send her an email. So why did you send her an email? Allah is just for the sake of Allah. Because I think she'll make the perfect wife, and that's the justification. So when people have justified it, they gave a reason. So you give a reason why you think I'm not sinful. Anyone? No one? Okay, I'll give you a reason. You think I'm not sinful because I didn't commit this sin, right? Okay. Now then, how do we understand the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that if two Muslims come together and they fight each other with their swords, the murderer and the murdered person will both be in the fire of Jannah. So the companions, they were as perplexed as we would be. They said, Ya Rasulullah, the killer, that's clear, that's understood, right? He committed a crime, a sin. So he's placed in Jahannam, that we don't dispute, that makes absolute sense. So why would the murdered person also be in Jahannam? So the Prophet said something very interesting that will make us understand this issue. He said, كَانَ حَرِيصًا عَلَى قَتْلِ أَخِيهِ. He was eager to kill his brother. Right? So you had the intention, you had every intention to commit the sin, but you were not prevented by your taqwa, you were prevented by other reasons. The closure of the casino, not having enough funds. Maybe you got into the casino and then you saw your uncle drive past. Like, oh, right? And you just go and you run away so that no one sees you. That's not the reason that we as Muslims should be giving up sins for. We should be giving them up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is when they are permanent, and that is when they are means of reward. When I used to be a drug counselor as well. I don't like to do it anymore. But when I used to be a drug counselor, what I used to realize is that if you can convince a drug addict that what he's doing is first and foremost a sin, and that he's destroying his iman before he's destroying his body and his relationships with his family and his friends, etc., then this is not the only way, but this is one means that, one means of therapy that is very effective. And I've seen this with many of the people that I've spoken to. Once they realize that what they are doing is destroying their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a permanent, in some cases, not all, because as we know, if you are addicted to something, it is extremely difficult to get it up. And even with sins in general, and that's the beauty. This is the beauty of bringing it back to this particular issue. I know we are digesting, but I hope this is useful, inshallah. Now, this person is a drug addict. It's a sin. But when you tell that person that what you are doing is destroying your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and destroying your iman, every time they relapse, they now have the same reason they gave it up the first place. When you try to get them away from their addiction using other means like family, like friends, like a job, like a wife or a husband or children, what happens when these people turn against them? That no longer becomes an option you can turn to. So let me give you an example. Let me just make it very clear. So the brother is a drug addict, is married with 2 children. If you tell him that if you don't stop your addiction, you are going to destroy your marriage and your relationship with your children, right? Then he says, yes, you're right. So he gives it up for 6 months. 6 months later, he relapses. But then his wife has had enough. So she divorces him, and she takes full custody of the children, which is entitled to in South African law. I don't know about Malaysia, but because he's an addict, she takes the children, and that's it. He's no longer married, and he no longer has his children. Now, what reason does he have now to give up his addiction? Do you understand? When you tell him that it is a sin, that every time he relapses, he knows that he needs to come back. He can come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that he can repent. There are other ways, there are other therapies, there's many of them very useful, but this is the one I like to implement, especially because of my background. This is the one, inshallah ta'ala. The 6th person is the person who gives sadaqah, who gives charity. And he hides it so much so that his left hand does not know what his right hand has given. Why would the Prophet ﷺ praise it in that way? The reason for that is that it is so secretive. His sadaqah is so secret that even one part of his body does not know what the other part of the body is doing. Today, unfortunately, someone builds a masjid, he wants his name on the side. Isn't it so? Tariq, Appleby built this masjid in 1950. But you know what I'm saying, right? So my name is there. When someone publishes something, they want their name there. When they give charity or they donate, they want their name or their company's name mentioned. If you want that for tax exemption, then don't intend for it to be sadaqah. I'll say that again. If you own a company and you are sponsoring an event, or you are sponsoring someone or something, They don't have the intention that it is sadaqah. Make the intention that it is a tax exemption for donation. Right? If you want it to be charity and you want it to be sincerely for the sake of Allah, I am not saying that if you do it the first way, that there is no reward. I'm saying if you want to make sure that there is reward, then rather give it secretly without anyone knowing where it came from. Alhamdulillah, today, let us use technology to implement the sixth trend. Let us use, our bank accounts, and let us rather, directly deposit money into their accounts without them knowing where the money has come from. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it even easier for us to give charity secretly. Lastly, the seventh person is that person, ذكر الله خاليا ففاضت عيناه. That person remembers Allah in secret, privately, and their eyes tear. How often do we, ask yourself this question. How often have you been alone and you cried when remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How often have you been just in your room or just driving in your car and you just thought about the majesty of Allah, you were in awe of His creation, and you said Allahu Akbar or Subhanallah, or you were reading the Quran, or you were making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you cried so much that it felt as if your eyes would not dry. When was the last time you did this, brothers and sisters? Let our hearts soften with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may Allah grant each and every one of us these attributes that we have mentioned, these seven, and there are so many more, but let's move on inshaAllah ta'ala. Right. So let's talk about these two references that you and I, as Muslims, need to be focusing on if we want to be successful in this life and in the year after. Those two are the Quran and the Sunnah. They are the book of Allah, and they are it is the legacy of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. His teaching, his sayings, his statements, his actions, his character. This is what we need to be focusing on if we want to be successful. The question is why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in an ayah in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He is the one who has sent to the people from themselves a prophet, a messenger. Who is this messenger? He is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why have you sent this messenger, O Allah? O our Master, why have you sent a messenger to us? What is his purpose? يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ. That this messenger will recite to you the verses, the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? يُزَكِّيهِمْ. So that he may purify. Why do they need purification, O Allah? They need purification because they have moved away from the reason why I have created them. Why have you created them, O Allah? I have created them for my worship. They worship me alone, and they worship me in the manner that I have prescribed and I have taught. Not in something that they have invented or that they have created, but the way that I want them to worship me. What I find pleasing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and He purifies them. What else does He purify them from? Their desires, their base desires. Right? We're going to talk about that today, inshaAllah. The need to get married, the need to satisfy our sexual desires, the desire for children, the desire for wealth, the desire for fame and popularity, the desire so that, the desire to feel welcome, to feel part of the group. These are all our desires. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent down the Quran and sent the Prophet to teach it and to read it to us so that we can control and manage our desires, so that our desires have purpose. They are used in a manner which is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like when you get married, that's channeling your desire in a halal way. When you have children in marriage, that is having something that you crave, that every person wants this. Subhanallah, there's a big trend now, and I deal with this, unfortunately, a lot, or at least when I was in South Africa, this was a huge problem. When women would be in their 30s and 40s, and they are not married. Right? They are not married. We're going to talk about that today as well, inshaAllah ta'ala. Why? Most of the time, it is not because they couldn't find someone. No, many people came to propose because they were pursuing their careers. Right? they were pursuing their careers. They graduated, they did their masters and their PhD, then they started working, moved up the corporate ladder, and they kept on doing this until when they realized they were 38 years old, not married, and desperately wanting to be married and have children. Right? And there are many men, unfortunately, but more women, in my experience, not in reality, but in my experience, there are men like this as well, who are so focused on material wealth and material, advancement, that they forget about their desires. And unfortunately, in most of these cases, when I speak to these people, most of them have been in haram relationships. Okay? Most of them have been in haram relationships because the thought of getting married seemed to be too inconvenient at the time. So what does Islam do? Islam teaches you how to manage those desires, how to make sure that your love for wealth and your desire for wealth, you all want money, right? Is there anyone here that doesn't like money? Let me see. Anyone? No, anyone? No one? No, there's not a person. Actually. I used to ask this question and people would actually put up their hands and I would have to say to them, liar. Right? I mean, I'm not talking about a billionaire, I'm not talking about becoming, Bill Gates or something. Just the fact that having money. When you go, has this ever happened to you? You go and you do some shopping and you take out your wallet or your purse and you don't have enough money. Right? Has that ever happened to you? Now that's the kind of financial independence and security that I take. And whenever I need to buy something, that I always have enough money. Right? That's where I would like to be. Not there yet, unfortunately. But inshallah, we'll get there one day. As soon as my kids start working, right? To get some extra income, inshallah. That's why we have children, right? Right? So they can work for us. Anyway, let's move on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, He purifies them. Purifies them and teaches them how to handle their desires, how to control them. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, and He teaches them the book and the wisdom, which is the sunnah. So you need that, because if you are going to purify your desires and control your desires, and you are going to realize and establish the reason why you have been created, then you will need knowledge, you will need wisdom, and you will need this guidance which Allah has revealed. Right? وَإِن كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. Even though these people, you and me as well, before we were sent the Prophet and the book, we were in clear guidance. We didn't know how to live our lives. If you look back at history, subhanAllah, you don't even have to look back at history. You just have to look now at the state of the world as it is right now.